being county historian opens lots of doors for me that wouldn't otherwise be opened. And I'm afforded a lot of opportunities that without holding that position would never have happened. One such opportunity came my way just before I came up here today, and I want to share it with you. It's ours. It came from Dallas, Texas, from a photographer framing studio in Dallas, Texas, where she sent it to have it prepared for us. It is the 1934 St. Mary's basketball team. You remember the email? Yeah. I thought it was neat. It really touched me because it's obviously a special possession of hers. It'll be too late for me to call her tonight, but I'll call her tomorrow and thank her, and I'm going to ask her because her last name is Valentine. And the fellow in the front row at the end, his name is Valentine. I assume there's a connection, which I intend to find out. But it's just things like this that make what we do here worthwhile and rewarding. And it certainly was a personal reward for me when I opened this up and realized what she'd gone through to get that to us, and what a nice job of framing it is and so forth. And I'm sure that it's going to end up in Emily's hands up in the schoolroom. She's salivating up here already over it. So, but we'll get the story before we turn.
Put a nail in the wall to get it up, hang it up.
Have to tell you another story. I didn't quite know how to introduce this, but Lou took care of that. There is a new series that will be in the paper starting in January. You know, the If the River Could Talk series went the entire year of 2016 as a bicentennial celebration, and incidentally, that's going to be a book. Will be available for Christmas, the publisher has told me. But I wanted to do something to begin to set us up to celebrate the county's bicentennial in 2023. And so I began to work on this project. Yeah, I work way out ahead. Way out ahead. And there's a reason for that, is because there's so much research that has to be done. And as I go along and I'm turning rocks over, I find some new things. And if I wait till the last to do the research, I'll miss something. So I work way, way ahead. Well, what happened is this series will come out in January, and it will run the first Sunday of the month from January 2018 through and including December of 2019. 24 stories. And the series is entitled, What's in a Name? What's in a Name? And it will address the questions that we get up here, and I get everywhere I go. How did Hardscrabble get its name? Why is Moonsville called Moonsville? Where was Buzzardsville? Yeah, and Buzzard's Roost, and Half Mountain, and Toad Level, and Broomcorn Row. Those were all Madison County communities. I've uncovered 143 names. Wow. Oh my God. And I've researched them. And I'm done. Unless somebody comes up with another name. But so fitting was this program tonight and this subject, because this afternoon I spent in the metropolis of Moonsville.
what?
Moonsville.
Just down the road.
And as I'm there doing what I do, down the road comes a man on a horse. And that just thought, wow. So I said, sir, may I take your picture? Why, he beamed right up and he said, absolutely you can. So I got that picture of him, and it will be in the Moonsville story when we get to Moonsville. But anyway, just to let you know, that's coming at you, and that's going to hopefully prepare us to appreciate the county's history in 2023, which you all have a date to be there. You all have a date to be there.
Guarantee that?
Well, you're invited, Maury. You're invited. Okay. Okay, Chet, if you're ready, I do want to acknowledge that local cable television is here, the city's channel, and always appreciate Chet coming. He puts these things on television, and then for those people that can't sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're on. We're on. Had several comments on the horse, and I've just told various ones, that's just an optical illusion. A history of horse racing tracks in Madison County, 1850 to the present. I got really interested in this a while back because of a discovery that I made. Well, I didn't make it. Somebody told me about it, and then I went and researched it and realized, hey, that is pretty neat. Maybe there's a story there. And so I began to look into horse racing in our county. And boy, did I come up with some pretty cool stuff. So I'm going to share that with you tonight. The sport of horse racing has been around since man first began keeping records, and probably before that. Indeed, over 2,600 years ago, the Egyptians, who loved chariot racing and mounted horse racing, included them in the 638 BC Olympics. Think of that. From those ancient arenas to modern race courses, it has been the sport of kings, as well as that of the common man. The first American horse race track was on New York's Long Island in the year 1665. It didn't take long for the sport to spread all across America, including Indiana, where it has achieved the status as a major industry in our state. Several years ago, the Indiana horse industry was estimated to be a $1.3 billion agribusiness employing more than 22,500 Hoosiers. That's a big business. At that time, it was estimated there were 14,300 horses in our state involved in racing. Madison County has long been a part of Indiana's horse racing tradition. In our county's history, races were mostly staged between hometown horses, wherever and whenever they could be held, the winner earning the bragging rights and perhaps a few dollars in his pocket. Over time came the racetracks. Our county's horse racetracks have a rather unique history, and one that I believe deserves a closer look, and that's what we're going to do this evening. As I transition from subject to subject, those transitions will be photographs of what I think are beautiful animals for you to enjoy. Hoosier Park. Today, Anderson's Hoosier Park is the 8th, and it is the youngest in a long lineage of racetracks devoted to the horse within the boundaries of our county. And on the right, you see an aerial view of Hoosier Park. The 7/8 of a mile dirt oval opened on September 1st, 1994. Can you believe it's been that long ago?
No.
when patrons attended the grand opening of the standardbred season. In 2013, Hoosier Park announced the discontinuance of thoroughbred racing in favor of the long-standing Hoosier favorite, harness racing. Not only is harness racing a Hoosier favorite, it has been the choice in Madison County since the first track was ushered into existence 167 years ago. Did you know that part of the agribusiness of Madison County is the training of those racehorses? This is something that was relatively new to me because I'm not into horse racing. I didn't know about them. But as I searched the county for its history, I began to notice what looked to be like racetracks. And indeed there are. There are 5 townships that make up the eastern border of our county, beginning in the south with Adams, above that's Union, above that's Richland, above that's Monroe, and above that's Van Buren. All 5 of those townships have training tracks in them, plus Lafayette Township. And those are all tracks that are there for people, and farms are there for people who race at Hoosier Park. Number 1 is in Adams Township. I'll show you, you see Markleville just below it, and there's a little bit closer look at it. It's on 300 East, north of Markleville. Also in Adams Township are tracks 2, 3, and 4. You see them spread across here. A closer look for number 2, between 200 East and State Road 109, south of 500 South. State Road 109, 200 East, 500 South is that track. Then at the intersection of 550 South and 300 East are the tracks number 3 and number 4. All of these are in very close proximity to Hoosier Park. The Anderson Fair Association Foster Park Athletic Park, 1900 to 1994. The 7th track to appear in our county was initially called the Anderson Fair Association Track. It was located on the grounds of what we know as Athletic Park, also the location of the last Fairgrounds to be located in or near Anderson. You see a drawing from the 1901 City Atlas, or County Atlas, to the side there showing that track. An aerial view of the track today. The association-owned half-mile track opened for a one-day tryout on July 4th, 1900. Judging from a photograph presumed to be taken that day, the horse races were very popular. The photograph reveals a covered wooden grandstand filled to capacity with 2,600 of the 4,000 spectators that the newspapers said were in attendance that day. This is one of my favorite photographs in our collection. I'll let that sit there for a moment because there's a lot to take in. If you notice, there are no automobiles. And the grandstand looks to me to be packed. Would you agree with me that that's a pretty spectacular photograph? While the races were popular, apparently interest in the fair was not. After only a few years and what was described as a general lack of interest in the fair by the public, the owner sold the property to the city of Anderson, who had plans to use the property for a city park. The sale was completed during the administration of Mayor Frank P. Foster, who you see there on the left. The renamed Foster Park was dedicated July 4th, 1913. In 1915, the name was changed again to Athletic Park, and harness racing continued there for a number of years, particularly during the annual summer fairs. 1913 flood. Turn on our televisions today and we're seeing something quite similar, aren't we? I point to you, the grandstand that you saw earlier, it's right here. Somebody has written that on the side of the photograph. That is Athletic Park, March of 1913. White River has come out of its banks. Another photograph exists taken in the summer of 1936 showing a packed grandstand watching racing under the lights. At some point after that, the roof was removed because by the 1950s, it was gone, as I remember. And there it is. Ferris wheel, the Anderson Free Fair is underway. Little sidelight, did you know that the Anderson Free Fair was the first free fair in our nation? First free fair in our nation offered by a municipality. Any guesses as to its first year? 1922. Isn't that a spectacular photograph, though? And look at the people. And look at the old cars in the infield. And all the light poles around. That's really a remarkable photograph, I think, for the photographer to be able to capture that. Well, the question is, where is he shooting from? I'd say he's up on top of a tree somewhere, because I don't know anything else around there that would have been that high, other than maybe a light pole or a tree. I don't know. He obviously wanted the shot awfully bad to do that. There's the grandstand with the roof still on it. And if you remember Gates in downtown Anderson, they've bought some advertising space on the side of that. So that's how that worked. Helped pay for it. So naming rights that we're so familiar with today were done earlier also. Another picture of the athletic park a few years ago. I'd say the photographer was up on the deck of the pool taking that photograph. Don't you like to look at old photographs? This is the south end facing north, Nancy. South end facing north. There's a later photograph when the roof was gone. This is how I remember it. Remember when they used to have a little league in the center of the center of the infield there, and the horse barns that were around. Today, only one horse barn remains, that one right there, which we'll get to here in just a moment. An official racing program from the 1948. This would have been July 3rd to July 10th, as the program says. That probably was the week of the free fair, because the free fair was always here on the 4th of July, was it not? And you walked over the 9th Street Bridge and you watched the fireworks. Well, notice the arrow points to a man by the name of Hector Kirk. And from your reaction, I gather that you know the name well. All of us do. In fact, his granddaughter, Sue Morgan, has been very generous in giving the society many of his personal items, which we have in our collection, with the promise of more to come at a later time. So we're very appreciative of that. A picture showing Heck up on the starter finish stand. And this is a 1960 free fair. He is the driver. Curly Lambert is the horse, and I think that was one of his famous horses. So I've got a horse expert right here, so
That's the blanket that we have.
I think that's the blanket.
And that's the blanket. That's the blanket that we have. Isn't it nice that the public has the confidence in us and the faith in us to give us these one-of-a-kind treasures? I always tell people, we'll give it a good home. This is what I told this lady. We will give it a good home. There they are on the finish line. That would have been the starting gate, would it not? That would have been out in front of the, then it would fold up and away they go. And that is a photograph that Sue gave me personally of Heck Kirk working out on the track. And that's the only remaining evidence that there was ever horse racing there. That's a pretty recent photograph that I took. Aren't they beautiful animals? Lafayette Township has number 5. To orient you, here comes Scatterfield Road, here comes Broadway. Here's is Grace Baptist Church, and here is that track. Well, you know, I think I hear the comment, you never see them. You don't. You drive right by them, and they're so concealed you don't see them. You don't realize they're there. But that's Lafayette Township. That's number 5. It's on Road 50 West between 300 and 360 North, number 5.
Did you shoot all the photographs of the horses?
No, I did not.
Okay, I was going to say.
Sign me up, right? No, I've got a few. Well, the one in there of the stables over at I shot that, Sam. You didn't comment on that, so. Sandford Moss track. How many of you heard of Sandford Moss? All right, we're getting back. We're getting back before our time period, aren't we? In operation from 1894 to 1934, 1895 to 1934. The 6th track on the list was not a conventional racing track, since regularly scheduled races were not held there. Instead, the half-mile dirt oval was used primarily for working out and training racehorses owned by the property owner, Sandford Moss, a well-known breeder and trainer of light harness horses. He is of the same family that Moss Island Mill, Moss Glass, Moss Cemetery, same person. His stock was highly sought after in the big city markets. He lived just east of the track on his 2,200-acre farm, which was roughly bounded by today's 25th Street on the south and extended north to the river. The eastern boundary was Rabel Avenue, while the western edge of his property was near Park Road. The track was situated in the Woodsdale addition on the city's west side and lay between Meadow Lane, Woodside Drive, Nickel Avenue, and West 11th Street. Nearby was a cluster of natural springs which furnished plenty of cool water for thirsty animals. What I've done here is taken a Google Earth shot of that area and then put the racetrack in about its size where it would be and proportion. This is Nickel Avenue. Here's Edgewood, just coming into Edgewood, and of course going back on Nickel Avenue towards Anderson. This remarkable photograph was taken in 1956, an aerial photograph, and it appeared in the Anderson paper July 11th, 1965, and if you look, you could see an outline of the track still there in 1956. In 1956. The earliest mention of the Sandford Moss track dates it to 1895, when it had the reputation of being one of the best tracks in this area. Moss achieved this during the track's construction by bringing in soil with a much higher clay content, making the surface much harder than otherwise would have been achieved using the adjacent soil. Melody tells me that the trotters need harder clay to run on, and so that's why that was done. The only races contested there were known as matinee races, which were races held for fun, with prizes being awarded occasionally, is what I could find out. They were considered neighborhood affairs and were not advertised to attract spectators. However, the track was not used exclusively for horse training and raising. This was interesting to me. The local members of Boyville used the racetrack for track meets. I'd never heard of Boyville, but there was an organization. It was a national organization, and it had a local chapter here called Boyville. Tell you a little bit more about them. Boyville was a national organization designed to give boys knowledge about the operation of a city. Regular meetings of the local chapter were held in the east basement room of the library. You remember? Over here. East basement room. On occasion, the boys would walk out to the Moss track and hold their meets. One member recalled doing this from 1906 to 1908. Additionally, a baseball field was laid out within the track's infield. The Anderson Cricket Clubs, yes, Anderson Cricket Clubs made use of the grounds and played their games there. In 1896, it was reported that Sandford Moss had 40 head of racing horses on his farm a mile west of the city, 30 of which were being trained to race. At that same time, Moss claimed he had the fastest 2-year-old filly in Indiana, whose name was Nana Chamberlain. Sandford Moss died in 1932. Approximately 2 years later, the ground upon which the track was located was plowed up and converted to farm use. Today, it is a housing residential area. This is a picture that we have of Sandford Moss outside of his stable there on the property. I don't know if that's Nana Chamberlain. It's not identified. Monroe Township, track number 6. You see the arrow pointing to it. It's on County Road 175 East between 1250 North and 1300 North. Again, you would never, driving by it, you would never know that it's there. The Elwood Driving Park and Fair Association, 1895 to around 1917. I can't nail it down any better than that. In the 1890s, the driving park associations were popular names for horse racing tracks. They provided a place for city horses to get a good run, as well as a place for horse racing and training. You see, in the 1890s, particularly here in Anderson and in Elwood, there was an affluent society because of the discovery of natural gas. And people had horses that they hitched to buggies, and that's how they got around. Well, those horses were stabled on North Main Street, down around 5th Street. And from time to time, the owner would want to work out the horse, and so he would take it out to the driving park for it to run. Same thing in Elwood. That was the initial purpose for a driving park, hence the name. There were 2 such tracks in Madison County. The first one is the county's 5th oldest track. If you notice, I'm going in reverse order. It was the Elwood Driving Park and Fair Association, which was organized on October the 3rd, 1895, by a group of prominent Elwood men who served as its board of directors. The official opening occurred on August 25th the following year. Situated on 40 acres a mile and a half northeast of Elwood and on the Duck Creek Township side of the line dividing it with Pipe Creek Township were the Fairgrounds. Dominating the grounds was a 2,500-seat covered grandstand for race spectators. The track appears to have been a 1/2 mile dirt oval that featured harness racing, which lasted until the fairgrounds closing shortly before World War I. The fair became a victim of a shift in interest to larger county fairs. The arrow points to this 1901 plat map of Pipe Creek and Duck Creek Township, and the arrow points to the location of the track, as you can see here, right on that line. Today, that is County Road 1300 North. And that's a photograph that we have of the grandstand at Elwood, and it is dated 1916, so it would be close to the end of its run. Now, where is that today? Well, the arrow points to this area right here where the track was, and I think if you want to use your imagination, you might see something here that suggests maybe that's the outline of the track. To orient you, here is Elwood High School. Makes you want to go home and buy a horse, doesn't it? Richland Township, tracks 7 and 8, arrows pointing to them. Number 7 is near the intersection of County Road 500 North and 500 East, so it's right out on the county line. This would be Delaware County. And number 8 then is between 450 North and 500 East. Are you surprised at all of these? Yeah. Well, there's another one in Richland Township, number 9. And it's on 3, yes.
Did you superimpose those ovals on this picture?
Would I do that?
Yes.
No, these are actual photographs, Bill.
They're still there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're still there. They sure are. This is on 300 North between and 375 East at that intersection. Number 9. The North Anderson Driving Park, 1892 to 1894, very short life. There's a reason for that. Located on 84 acres of ground in what is today North Anderson, and bounded by today's School Street, Hartman Road, Broadway, and the CSX Railroad track, was the North Anderson Driving Park Association, the 4th track in our county's history. The 1-mile track began operations in 1892 and featured annual races, complete with a grandstand and several outbuildings, including larger stables. For reasons unknown, the races were not well attended, and the association members had hoped, this coupled with a refusal by the stockholders to pay the property assessments, led to an order by the circuit court in 1894 that the property be sold. What I have learned in my research of old newspapers of the time, that the public, now where this was, I need to tell you that first, where it was where Myers Auto World used to be on North Broadway. Okay? Everybody with me? What I found out was that the reason why people didn't go there was too far out there. It was too far out there to take the time to go out there. That was its main objection, and that's why people didn't support it. It was too far to go.
Had the streetcar line been extended that far yet?
No, this was before the streetcars.
Okay.
This was before the streetcars went out there, I guess I should say it that way. This is from a Sandford insurance map that we have of the city, and it shows the driving park here out of almost off the edge here of the North Anderson. This would be School Street.
Back then it was called First Street, wasn't it?
Back then it was called First Street. Yes, it was, Emily, thank you. The grandstand and the stables. And for those of you who remember the article I put in about the sham Civil War battle that occurred on July 4th, 1895, it's right in here is where that battle was fought. Lew Wallace led the Union forces. That's where that all occurred. This shows you, it's a plat map, Lafayette Township, and you see the arrow pointing to this area here. That's where it was. This would be Hartman Road. And a Google Earth map with, I've wrapped the boundaries of it with these arrows to show you the size of the grounds that the driving park occupied. Union Township, numbers 10 and 11. You can see this one's pretty good size. This one you can barely see, but he's there. I'll zoom in on him so you can see. Number 10 is on 150 South between 300 and 400 East. And that little number 11 is on 300 East between 150 and 200 South. Again, you could drive down 300 East and you'd never know it was back there. That's 11. We're not done.
Maine.
Yeah. I was going to tell you I took this down along White River, but
During flood time.
I'm afraid everybody get up and leave. So. Bill thinks I doctor my photos up anyways. The Madison County Joint Stock Agricultural Society. Now there's a mouthful. 1868 to 1890. A county fair was the reason for the existence of yet another 1/2 mile dirt oval located on the grounds of the Madison County Joint Stock Agricultural Society. In other words, it was livestock and it was produce. The property was situated between present-day 8th, 3rd, and John Streets and Madison Avenue in Anderson. Between 8th and 3rd, John and Madison Avenue. Picture that? That was the Fairgrounds. It was also the site of the last public execution in Madison County in that area. But that's another story. The arrow points to the map of Anderson. This would be a 1901 map of Anderson. The arrow shows you where that track was located. Formally organized in May of 1868, the Agricultural Society opened the fairgrounds in the fall of that year. The 12-acre grounds contained a 1/2 mile dirt oval, which was situated roughly between what is today 6th Street to near 3rd Street and Madison Avenue and Hendricks Street. Hendricks is 1 block east of Madison Avenue, isn't it? And then we have 6th Street and 3rd Street, so that track fit into that property. Parts of the track were marked with big rocks designating its boundaries. One of them can still be seen in the area today if you know where to look. You see, they didn't build fencing around the racetrack, they just laid large stones to mark the curves. And one of those stones still exists. I have to credit Gene Bach for showing that to us. But first of all, here is another map of Anderson showing the fairgrounds and the track in the location that I just described. And here's that photograph of Gene Bach. How many remember Gene Bach wrote for the Bulletin? Wow. No? Okay. Man About Town? Man About Town.
Do you remember him?
That's Gene Bach. Sure I do.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. He discovered this rock with the address on there and did a story on it. Well, I went looking for the rock and I found it at the same address. Now, I parked my car at the curb and I get out and my wife says I'm going to get shot someday. Because I walked up on the property to get a good picture of that, and the homeowner came out and she sat down in that chair and she just glared. I took my photograph and I said, "Thank you very much. I like your rock." She just shook her head like, "That guy's crazy." That's all that was said.
So she doesn't know what it is?
So she doesn't know what it is. The track was utilized for the exhibition of horses in harness and under saddle. Trotters, pacers, and runners were very popular and drew large crowds. From 1868 until 1887, the annual fair was well attended there. Thursdays were always the best days to attend, as the best races usually held on that day, and thousands of spectators lined the track to watch the racing. This is all according to the old newspapers that I can find. This was a big, big draw. In the late 1880s, interest began to decline. Faced with an increasing debt, the fairgrounds and the track closed in 1890. With the discovery of natural gas in our area in 1887, manufacturing bloomed, and with it people with a need for a place to live. The former fairgrounds and its racetrack became prime real estate. If you can picture that area today, the stately trees that are in that area, I'm talking about the area north of 8th Street, east of Madison Avenue. East of Madison Avenue. Stately trees in there, beautiful area, prime real estate. Local entrepreneur James M. Donnelly seized upon that opportunity and purchased the old fairgrounds and platted it into city lots. It was his son Wade who was instrumental in the development of Edgewood some 40 years later. So the Donnellys developed two areas of Anderson. You see the fairgrounds addition here. This is Madison Avenue. This would be 8th Street, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, and 3rd. But the fairgrounds addition, and these are the plotted for housing, and of course they sold like hotcakes. The arrows again, I've kind of roughly put in the four corners of the racetrack boundary for you to see where it was located in that aerial shot today. Of course, now it's all filled up with houses and one rock. Van Buren Township, number 12. You would find that on State Road 9 going north to past Alexandria, and it's between 1400 North and 1450 North. The Fall Creek Fair Association, 1868 to 1876. Included on the grounds was a 1/3 mile time track, which was constructed and first used in September of 1868. It did not take long for the organizers to realize they needed more ground, which was accomplished by the purchase of additional acreage, extending the property to the old Pendleton to Eden Pike, which is today's State Road 9. Along with the expansion came a larger racetrack. In 1872, the original 1/3 mile track was increased to a 1/2 mile. And here you see Fall Creek Township. You see the town of Pendleton. This is 1901, and so the track was out here where the fairgrounds were located in the country. Today, the part of Pendleton now has absorbed all of that. The track on the grounds of the Madison County Joint Stock Agricultural Society in Anderson and the track located on the grounds of the Fall Creek Fair Association south of Pendleton both had their beginnings in 1868 and thus tie for the title of the second oldest racetracks in Madison County. I know you're getting excited. What is the oldest one? I can feel the tension.
I think he's going to tell us.
A group of Pendleton citizens calling themselves the Pendleton Agricultural Society organized the Fall Creek Fair Association on July 20th, 1867. That same year, they purchased 18 acres of ground 3/4 of a mile south of Pendleton on which to hold annual fairs, primarily to benefit the people of southern Madison County. In 1874, beginning September 8th and running through the 11th, a variety of races were featured during the 7th annual fair. I looked this up, and here are some of the races that they contested and the names, and this, I'm just going to read it to you as I found it. Among them were the Green Trot Race for horses that never went. Fast Pace, which was a free-for-all, they said. You had a 3-minute trot, a fast trot, a free-for-all, and a running race which consisted of a half-mile dash. I'm really curious about the horses that never went, though. Can't find anything else out on that. If I do, I'll report back to you. Unfortunately, the track's expansion put so much of the financial strain on the society that the directors were forced to dissolve the association in February of 1876. Of all the tracks constructed in the 19th century in Madison County, only one can still be seen, or at least a portion of it can be. On the east side of South Pendleton Avenue in Pendleton, one can still see what remains of that old racetrack. Located in a pasture just off the road is the faint outline of the track that for 8 years witnessed the only form of organized horse racing in that part of our county. And here I've taken an aerial shot with the arrow pointing to where that track is located. And now I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. Can you see the outline of it? Can you see the outline of it? It's actually just a depression in the ground, is what it is. Well, let's go down on the ground and see what it looks like. But first of all, these are the boundaries of the Fair Association. They began on the north at East Clark Street, and they ended on the south just below State Road 9. That's where the fair was held all of those years. And standing in Pendleton today is one of the posts of the original entrance to that fairgrounds, and that's it. It's at Clark Street and South Pendleton Avenue. There were 2 on either side of Clark Street here at its west end, and at its east end there were 2 more. The other 3 are gone. This is the only one that remains. 1868. Now, here is the outline of the track, and I've got several photographs, and I'll just go through those rather quickly, but you can see the outline of that original racetrack. When I was there, back in here were horses, and I was so in hopes they would come up in this area. But wouldn't you know it, they just turned around and went in the barn. But that's, it is a horse pasture today. And the property belongs to some people by the name of Reski. Reski. Scott Reski is their son, and he was a state representative. This is it.
Twins.
Siamese twins.
Yes.
The honor of being the first horse racing track in Madison County goes to one about which we know the least. From 1850 to 1855, the Madison County Agricultural Society held its annual fair in Anderson and leased a 25-acre site bounded by present-day John Street, Madison Avenue, 10th Street, and 8th Street. Here, a horse race track of unknown size and known simply as the Old Racetrack. That's all that I can find reference to it. It was just called the Old Racetrack. At the west end of 10th Street, contested the first horse races in Madison County. The first fair was held there on September 14th and 15th, 1850. We're going way back. Fairs were held here annually until the lease expired in 1855. Interesting, because it wasn't a racetrack, but they moved out to this site in 1850. Before that, the fairs were held downtown on what is today our Courthouse Square. But there was no courthouse in the 1830s. The courthouse was over where City Hall is today. And that square, that's now the Courthouse Square, was lined with trees. So they cut the trees down to make way for the fair, and they left the stumps. Everywhere, stumps. And it was on those stumps that they set their pumpkins and their cucumbers and their tomatoes. That's how the fair was conducted. No extra charge for that information. The society, having no suitable site on which to continue the fair, was forced to go out of existence. As I said, in 1855, it wasn't until 1867 when it was reconstituted and ended up over there north of 8th Street. This is an aerial view showing you Madison Avenue, 10th Street, John and 8th Street. Mays Park is just on this side of 10th Street, and it was this area right here that was where the fairgrounds were, and somewhere in there was that old racetrack. There was one track that may not have achieved the status of the 8 more well-known tracks in our county, but nonetheless was equally enjoyed by those who raced their horses there. It was on a piece of property known as the Blackledge Farm, located at the northeast corner of the intersection of County Road 100 West and State Road 128. Here, youngsters, and one of those youngsters is in the room today, would race both bareback and saddle on ponies and quarter horses around the 1/4 mile track in the early 1940s. And it was from that youngster that I got this story. And this is an aerial view of 100 East, which is 100 West, which is Madison Avenue, and State Road 128. And it would have been in this field right here that the old Blackledge Farm. Without question, there have probably been more places to race horses in our county since its inception in 1823. Sadly, their locations and stories are unknown, but hopefully yet to be discovered. I thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And I will try to answer your questions. Dick?
I'm thinking back in the middle part of the 20th century, the racing, the harness racing athletic park was part of a circuit.
Part of a
Tracks.
circuit?
Yes.
Right, that big
The
circuit.
Delaware County Fairgrounds, Montpelier, Converse come to mind.
Yeah.
There probably were others, but those those four locations
Yeah,
coming.
they just
Yeah.
went from racetrack to racetrack.
Yeah,
There was.
They went from one
That was the
racetrack
county
to,
circuit. Yep, that's the county circuit.
yeah, there you go.
Still going on.
Any other comments, questions?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, who was the person that
They
raced
still
there?
race there.
pardon me?
Who was the person that raced on the Black Ridge Farm?
Well, I think Emily's the one that told me that story. You don't remember telling me that story?
I never
As a
was
child?
there.
Well,
You blame me for everything.
Well,
we'll let it go at that.
we used to visit there because my
Yeah.
grandmother was friends with Black Ridges.
What, your grandmother was friends with them? Okay. Was it you then that raced horses there?
And
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Bruce?
That dog track used to be down by Fortville or Fortville or something. Was that in Madison County?
No,
that's Hancock County.
that's Hancock County, Bruce. Yeah.
Steve, I'm so grateful you don't have anything to do except research history. This is tremendous.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate that very
A
much.
lot of hours of work.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, if there are no other questions, I do want, yes,
Never went would probably mean first time starters, yeah.
I'm sorry?
First time starters.
Yes,
Never had
never
raced before.
They've never went racing.
They've
Never
raced-
went is what? First time. Ah,
Raced before.
never raced before. Thank you.
That's why they're
Thank you.
Hoosier Park had
Green,
a
yeah.
stone track.
Okay.
Stone.
See, I teach, but I'm also taught, aren't I? Yeah. Yeah.
And isn't the reason they took away thoroughbred racing because they had to change the
They had
track?
to change the track. anyway.
The surface has to be softer, I'm told, for thoroughbred racing than for harness racing. Harness racing, as I told you, Sandford Moss brought in special clay to pack his course down so that it would support the harness racing. Thoroughbreds, I'm told from my friend Melody, that they do not do well on hard surfaces. So.
with standard bred racing like you're seeing there. Those horses are pulling carts, and those carts have got to go in soil that is not deep. So the soil must be packed hard so those wheels can turn. Whereas a thoroughbred is carrying weight, not pulling weight. And he has to have cushion as he runs.
Could you come up and demonstrate that?
On the right, this goes to the left.
Well, Lou, I'll turn it back over to you again. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.